It's always good to hear, right? And I appreciate that introduction. My name's Michael Nelson, and this is my first time at a UFO conference of any time. So I always tell everybody at the beginning, and it might be a little redundant, I'm not a ufologist, and I don't know a whole lot about the phenomena. But I did find some stuff that is, I guess, related here that I found intriguing, and in the course of how this whole thing evolved, I guess it ended up being pretty good information for this field. So I'm here today to present to you quickly what I have. I call my talk, and there will be a book coming out in December being published by Penguin called In Pursuit of the Truth. And what it really boils down to is some information I came across quite incidentally and by accident that kind of led me to be here. So I would first like to thank MUFON for the opportunity to speak about this subject at such an important and august body of ufologists and interested laypersons. I sent a lot of emails out and got invitations from several different UFO organizations, and by far, based on the responses, I thought MUFON was one of the more credible. And I really appreciate, especially the interested laypersons, because as in archaeology, most of the stuff comes from non-trained professionals, so that's important. Let me start from the start. As I said, I'm not a ufologist, nor am I necessarily a confirmed believer in the phenomena, but I am an open-minded scientist, and the term I use is I'm willing to suspend my disbelief in order to objectively examine evidence and follow evidence to where it leads me, rather than starting with a preconceived idea and making the evidence fit where I think it should go, which is unfortunately what a lot of debunkers do. And I don't consider them scientists, in my opinion. Also, I'll be showing a brief second PowerPoint presentation at the conclusion of mine. Phyllis Budinger, who's an analytic chemist who's, I believe, spoken at a MUFON convention in the past, was going to present my physical evidence portion, and she unfortunately couldn't make it. So about 4 days ago, I got an email saying, "Here's my PowerPoint presentation. Good luck." Please bear with me. I'll try to do that. I also want to say at the end of this that my presentation is fairly brief. I would like to entertain any questions that you might have, and I've been told if any of you, as I'm doing this, come up with a question you'd like to ask about any of the data or anything about the case, to please come up to this microphone over here to ask your question so everybody can hear it, because hearing an answer to a question you didn't hear doesn't help very much. By profession, I'm an archaeologist, and my specialties are historical archaeology in the United States and geophysical survey methodology, which includes ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, resistivity, and photographic analysis. In the prehistoric realm, my specialty is monumental landscapes. So you might wonder how I got involved with a well-known UFO case, and hopefully this will help explain some of this. From 1985 to 1989, when I was an undergraduate student, I was a deputy sheriff for the Portage County, Ohio Sheriff's Office, which is located in Ravenna, Ohio, which is in northeast Ohio. And in 1986, we were doing a jail renovation. We were actually moving some offices and updating the jail. And being a deputy that was well down the seniority list, I was tasked with the very dangerous, important duty of going into the basement for 3 days and reviewing files that were being shredded for the move. As you might imagine, I thought it was pretty good at the time. I'm going to get paid for sitting in a basement rather than pulling in drunk drivers and rowdy people and telling neighbors to quit having their dogs go in the neighbor's yard, and the type of calls that the majority of what law enforcement does. And so there I was in the basement of Portage County Sheriff's Department, and we had a company that had come in and was shredding the documents for security reasons, and I'd have to review them. So they'd hand me all these old files, and I'd look at it, and if it was a murder case or an open missing person case, no, that goes into the safe pile, and if it was a dog barking complaint, off it went for shredding. And one of the gentlemen found an old desk, and they were going through the files in there, and they brought up a big box. Basically, it was like a banker's box, I guess is how I described it. And I just briefly looked at the top because I was just trying to evaluate whether to keep it or shred it. And there was a yellowing slip on the top and typewritten letters taped on, and it said the 1966 Spaur/UFO case. Well, in 1966, I was 3, so needless to say, I didn't know anything about the case. I didn't know anything about those deputies. So it was a big, heavy case, though, and I'd never heard of a UFO call resulting in a large case file. To be frank with you, we still respond to UFO cases. The Sheriff's Department does. And they actually have a report for UFO cases that's even shorter than the usual incident report that you do, because they expect you to go there, spend about 5 minutes so we can record we responded to a citizen call, and you hit the road. So this was a whole box, so it definitely got my attention. I looked inside it, and there were files and files. There were physical evidence bags still marked with evidence tags. There was reel-to-reel tapes and photographs. So I called my duty sergeant and said, hey, I found something that's shreddable. It's not an open case. It's not a death. It's not a murder investigation. Can I keep it? And he said, oh, it's going to be shredded. Have at it. So I took that home and I meant to read it because it sounded like interesting reading. And again, that was in 1986. The next time I saw the box was 1998 when we were moving, and I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this box. It was, and by then I was a graduate student, and we're pretty busy, but I was kind of getting sick of theory and writing, and so I said, I'm going to sit down and spend the summer reading this box. So anyways, that's kind of, this was me then. I got to put it up there because if you look real close, I did have hair under the hat. I didn't have a gut, and I had the really cool sunglasses. I'm working on getting a case of them for the AV crew, actually. They saw this and were like, well, we can get this. It's pretty cool. Although I was a dedicated law enforcement officer, by the time that I came to look at this case, I was an archaeologist and working in the field. So as I started going through this box, I realized that there was over 200 documents in this box. And by documents, I'm referring to there's an initial incident report, there's a Detective Bureau incident report, there were narrative, what's called a narrative page, pages and pages of what in law enforcement is called the narrative, which is referring to things in the report. There were drawings. Most importantly, there was a whole pile, literally probably about that thick, of voluntary witness statements. So I started looking through this in the reel-to-reel tapes, and it was all very interesting. There was what really caught my attention was there was a memo from then Deputy, the Sheriff, Ross Dussman, to Detective Steve Smith. And incidentally, I was a deputy with Steve Smith's son. I didn't even know this till after I was an archaeologist, and I went back and reviewed it. I said, it was that Steve Smith's father, and I called, and it was. But anyways, he specifically said, do not tell the government investigators or the NICAP people that you're doing this independent investigation as a memo. Now, as you might have imagined from my introduction, I don't know a whole lot about this field, and so NICAP, I was like, is that nightcap? Is that, is that some, I didn't even know what any of this was. So, but it seemed like he was trying to not let a lot of people know that he was doing this investigation. So, needless to say, I was kind of interested. One of the files I'll just point out in here was this one from then Congressmember Gerald Ford to the NICAP investigator who was investigating this particular case, and it's very difficult to read there, and I'm not sure what it is, but he's basically saying he appreciates the information on the sighting, and that's when he was pushing for some sort of congressional investigation to be held, which ultimately resulted in something that was called the Condon Commission. That was a result of this case and a couple of others because some high-ranking congressmen were pursuing that. But what really got my attention was, as I started reading it on, was what became evident was the deputies and the local police officers and even the civilian witnesses who were involved with this almost universally had a really bad experience. And that kind of made me angry because in law enforcement today, you would think in the pursuit of justice, what you're interested in is people who know something to come forward, because the whole point is to discover the truth, right? So when you have someone come forward and say something and the result is that their reputation is lost and jobs are lost and marriages crumble, which happened in this case, that doesn't encourage a lot of other people to want to come forward with the truth, because you can always say, well, look what happened to Dale. And we'll get to that here. But anyways, so I started to get angry, and it was obvious that all the witnesses were discredited or persuaded to keep quiet, mostly by what I could read in reports were our own government.